early treatment, not so well supported, but suggested at 20,000 international units a day. Vitamin C for acute treatment, 3,000 milligrams a day. Quercetin acute treatment, 500 milligrams twice a day. And then the update is the use of over-the-counter famotidine or Pepcid, not the conventional dose for stomach acid, but a much higher dose at 80 milligrams a day. That agent reduces inflammation as well as almost certainly viral replication of SARS-CoV-2. And on my Twitter feed, P_McCullough MD, I always put the title, the authors, and the main conclusions or figures from key studies. A recent study out in over 20,000 people with COVID-19, Dave, from University of Virginia, showing a marked reduction in the risk of decompensation, need for oxygen, or worse, with famotidine. The other over-the-counter agent in that study that's advised because the virus causes blood clots is aspirin. So famotidine and aspirin there, aspirin at 325 milligrams a day. I generally suggest it for 30 days for adults, 90 days in those with atherosclerosis, Dave. So the first 2 points are available to everybody in the country. We're still having COVID-19. Omicron has broken through both vaccine and natural immunity. It tends to be mild. I'm still treating patients. I'm still getting these phone calls. We went through the big Omicron outbreak, and now we're having a little secondary wave of Omicron subvariants. They're easily managed. I checked recently on the U.S. hospital census. To give you an idea, Dave, our breaking point for COVID hospitalizations, which would start to impact other care nationally, is 129,000 simultaneously hospitalized individuals. Mm-hmm. When I testified in the U.S. Senate in November of 2020, we were approaching that. In fact, our zenith was in January of 2021. We had 125,000 Americans in the hospital. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right now, the current number is about 25,000 in the hospital. So it's a fraction. And these are not adjudicated cases. These are people who could be in for a hip replacement or some other procedure, and they happen to be testing positive. We now know that when someone has COVID, that they test positive intermittently for months. And in the peer-reviewed literature, Dave, there's someone who's tested intermittently positive for over a year now. So any one of these, quote, COVID cases must be adjudicated if they're sick or not with the respiratory illness.
So the same people, Pete, that denigrate prevention techniques that you've discussed, the same people that denigrate early effective treatment, are the same people that instituted such horrible medical interventions such as lockdowns, saying that they were effective and they work. Well, this just came out from the National Bureau of Economic Research. I want you to comment on the Faucis of the world and their recommendations in the past. This from Julian Conradson. This was never about saving lives. Restrictive public health lockdowns likely caused 170,000 plus non-COVID excess deaths among working-age Americans. A new study from the National Bureau of Economic Research has revealed that crippling and restrictive public health measures implemented throughout the COVID-19 pandemic were the most likely cause of a staggering over 170,000 non-COVID excess deaths amongst young Americans in 2020 and 2021. Pete?
Dave, I can tell you the mortality signal is staggering for working age individuals, and everyone is trying to sort this out. The actuaries in actuarial society reports have the data. They know who's died of COVID, the respiratory illness, and it's a small fraction of the excess deaths. We now in 2021 are 40% over a baseline of working age individuals. We already have the most labor constrained market in modern history right now. We're losing our workers fast, and they are dying. There's even a syndrome that's been named called sudden adult death syndrome, where people suddenly die. Now, whether that be due to lockdowns, depression, suicide, obesity, acceleration of other natural causes of death like cancer or cardiovascular disease, many are concerned, Dave, that the new introduction, the new exposure in our society is the 82% of Americans who have taken one or more of the COVID-19 vaccines.
So let's delve now onto the three most recent and important issues related to the jab, the COVID-19 vaccinations. Information that's being suppressed, repressed from the public by the medical industrial complex and the bought off lamestream fake media, because they're hand in glove, the two. What are the three most important aspects, the recent developments related to findings related to the jab that people are unaware of, Pete?
We have now over 1,000 peer-reviewed publications in the National Library of Medicine or on the preprint server describing, analyzing, and attributing non-fatal and fatal injuries to the COVID-19 vaccine, particularly the spike protein, which is clearly pathogenic. Over 1,000, Dave, over 200 on COVID-19 vaccine-induced myocarditis. The general findings are all the vaccines cause these syndromes. There is really nothing unique to a particular vaccine outside the fact that they cause the body to produce the spike protein or expose the patient to the spike protein. The genetic vaccines cause spike protein production for an uncontrolled quantity and uncontrolled duration of time, and in some, it may be in the wrong place at the wrong time, too much, causing organ damage or causing death. In myocarditis is clear. There are documented, published fatal cases of myocarditis by Verma, Choi, and Gill. There are documented fatal cases of vaccine-induced thrombocytopenic purpura. Published cases of fatal anaphylactic allergic reactions, including those on administration of the third or fourth shot. So it's clear the vaccines have a very concerning safety profile. And this month, June 2022, the World Council for Health has issued a report and a recommendation to pull all COVID-19 vaccines off the market, out of public use. Now, last fall, they called for a pause, meaning that they ought to stop them and analyze them. They're officially calling for withdrawal from the marketplace. Other reports had come in through 2021. I was part of a paper by Aruna and colleagues where we warned all the governments. We had submitted it to 8 different journals, could not get it published, but we warned that there was no safety mechanisms. The evidence-based consulting group in the UK submitted specifically to the MHRA a 20-page report saying the vaccines in the UK, which are Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca, are not fit for human use. And now the World Council for Health, which is really strongly representative of 70 different organizations with concerns over pandemic response under the World Council for Health. This is a huge group, Dave. They're calling for pulling these products off the market.
And yet not one word in the bought-off lamestream fake media about that organization stepping forward and making that recommendation that I'm aware of. Are Dave, you aware of anyone Dave, in the media? What? It's
even worse. It is actually shadow banned in Google searches. When you Google search, when you type in World Council for Health, it brings up World Health Organization, WHO. So it's even worse. There are clearly efforts afoot to conceal vaccine injuries and deaths in order to promote mass vaccination. And in our book, I make it very clear. I think when I really publicly said it was over a year ago in my breakout interview with Tucker Carlson. I said, Tucker, those individuals who are most strongly suppressing the prevention and treatment of COVID-19 are the same ones who are promoting the vaccine. The two are linked. That includes CDC, NIH, and FDA, all the major medical societies. The AMA overtly has a campaign to abolish the use of ivermectin. Abolish it, Dave. There's a couple dozen countries that feature either ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine as their kind of lead drugs in their protocols. Why would an American medical society that's largely a physician advocacy society take an issue with one of the drugs to treat COVID-19? Now, Now we actually see undermining of Paxlovid, the Pfizer drug, the combination of nalfenpiravir and ritonavir. There's active undermining with papers and news feeds about Paxlovid rebound and Paxlovid failure in a prevention trial. There's no word of the Merck drug, molnupiravir. We've had undermining and sequential withdrawal from the market of the monoclonal antibodies, Dave, based on theoretical changes in the virus and mutations. So the monoclonal antibodies are withdrawn from the market. Americans can't get treatment, but the vaccines aren't changed or withdrawn. You can't have a more clear set of examples that there is the suppression of all forms of treatment and then a continued promotion of unchanged genetic vaccines with a very unfavorable safety profile.
And what is truly evil, and I mean evil, that's not an overstatement. What evil about this, Pete, is early on, the perpetrators of this ongoing, I'm going to call it crimes against humanity, the perpetrators, the government, FDA, NIH, CDC, the big pharmaceutical companies that are involved in these jabs, they knew there were problems, and they, as you well know, and I'm sure many of our listeners know, what the FDA and Pfizer accumulated data for the first several months that it was being distributed from December 14, 2020 to February 28, 2021, and they put their lawyers in place to try to block this information from coming out for 50 years and then 75 years. And fantastic attorneys such as Aaron Siri stepped up, and Freedom of Information Act from doctors and scientists and physicians that said, wait a minute, we want a judge, at least we got one, honest judge stepped up and said, no, you need to cough up that information. When they coughed it up, Pete, it showed in that 2.5 month time period, as you're well aware, 1,223 people died from the jab, not from the jab. Another 42,000 people had adverse reactions in that first 2.5 night time period, sustaining 156 medical adverse events. Pete, they knew it. They knew it that early, if not before. And Pete, they hid it and they suppressed it. And what's even worse, the same people were out there saying it's safe and effective. Pete, this is criminal.
Dave, I would say the other criminal intent here is that the media will not ask Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla about these deaths. Now, keep in mind, the attorney for the FDA did not want to release these data for 55 years and then double down to an even longer period. That's the FDA didn't want to release it. It's released. It's in the court-ordered documents. Pfizer knew about 1,223 deaths within 90 days. And in the World Council for Health report calling for the vaccine withdrawal, Dave, they point out with recall of various vaccines, the number of events. Polio, one version of the polio vaccine called the Cutter incident in 1955, 10 deaths pulled off the market. Swine flu, 53 deaths. A drug, Meridia, 94 deaths. Posicor, heart drug, I remember that one, 118 deaths. DES, 213 deaths. Seldane, 406 deaths. Regulin, 649 deaths. Baycol, 714 deaths. Bextra, 1,054 deaths. And then Vioxx, actually recalled in 2004, ultimately vindicated in the courts, but that one rose to 6,633 deaths. The total number of COVID-19 deaths through the data systems that the World Council for Health has, now that would include VAERS, Yellowcar, and UDRA, they have that number, Dave, at 28,532. And the World Council for Health has been very careful about it. Make sure there's no duplicates.
Right.
Because so this report is available at the World Council for Health resources, COVID-19 vaccine pharmacovigilance. You'll find it there, Dave. They got a wonderful graph. The COVID-19 vaccines take the cake for the risk of death. And Marc Giaudot from France, scientist in a lot of our working groups, says has proposed a name for this. It's called the Russian roulette theory of COVID-19 vaccination. Do you know when the messenger RNA vaccines are made, the messenger RNA is pretty unstable. It has to be cooled, and probably each strand is a little bit different than the next one because of how the base pairs line up, and there has to be humanized code within it so the ribosomes will read it, and then there's these nucleoside analog caps. The belief is that each vial and each lot is different, okay? And on top of that, there are multi-use vials. So there's actually a lot of needles being stuck in each vial. So there's an opportunity for changing oxidation, sulfation. There may be changes in cooling. And so one theory here, Dave, is a lot of people actually probably get a dud, that they get a shot and not much happens. They don't get much immune protection, if any, but they don't really get much in the way of side effects. But if someone really gets a good install of messenger RNA coding for the lethal Wuhan spike protein, it does exactly what it's supposed to do. It injures organs and, in fact, causes death. And when we apply the Bradford Hill criteria for death due to COVID-19 vaccines, we fulfill all the criteria. It's epidemiologically consistent that the vaccines are causing death in a large number.
And then we get to a hearing that was chaired by Senator Ron Johnson and yourself, a fantastic hearing with tremendous amount of information. And I want to focus on one component of it. A fantastic attorney by the name of Tom Renz, who's a friend of ours, who presented at that hearing as well, and has had whistleblowers come forward through the Department of Defense, which documents these adverse events and deaths, and a huge number of what they've uncovered, and then all of a sudden the Defense Department's changing their data, but a huge number of office visits and physicians within the military related to the jab. I mean, it's all consistent, Pete.
It's true. The important thing about the DMED database, the Department of Defense Epidemiologic Database, is that it's a clinical occurrence system, Dave, so they know who took the vaccine, and then they have clinical encounters. It's different than spontaneously reported safety events, which may or may not get reported. The spontaneously reported safety events are thought to be a gross underestimate of what's really happening, because unless somebody has the vaccine card and they really press their care provider to enter it or make the entry themselves, it probably doesn't get entered. And that is showing, there's typically 4 domains we worry about. Myocarditis, which the FDA and all the regulatory agencies says happens. Blood clots, which again, the regulatory agencies say happen. Immunologic abnormalities like multi-system inflammatory disorder, well supported in the peer-reviewed literature. And then blood disorders of various types, including vaccine-induced thrombocytopenic purpura. Outside of those 4 domains, for the first time, the DMED database opened up 2 more domains of concern. One is maternal fetal health. That is miscarriages and stillbirths among military personnel, administrative personnel, service personnel. Very concerning, much higher annual risk of this once the vaccine program was implemented. And then the other is cancer, oncologic risk. And we know from a paper from University of Pittsburgh that the S2 segment clearly interacts with the P53 and the BRCA or BRCA genes that govern solid organ tumors and reproductive tumors in women, respectively. This is very concerning, and there is now an increasing literature of concern. It may not be with 1 or 2 shots, Dave, but with 3 or 4 shots, we know that the messenger RNA stays in the body several months, as shown in a paper from Stanford by Holken and colleagues, and that, in fact, the spike protein is in the body, it's thought, for over a year, as shown by Dr. Bruce Patterson. These are greatly concerning because if the spike protein is indeed oncogenic, it may be in susceptible people where it either drives a latent or previously unrecognized cancer, or it's directly oncogenic itself.
Pete, I want to take us back to August of 2021 and then February of 2023. Pfizer's jab was approved as Comirnaty in February of 2022. Moderna's jab, Spikevax, was approved both by the FDA. Now, my contention is this. When you read through those FDA documents, they talk about Pfizer and Comirnaty, Moderna and Spikevax. They are legally distinct entities. They're legally distinct entities, and it became apparent, at least to me, that they approved something, Comirnaty, back in August of 21 and in February 20. They approved something, Comirnaty and Spikevax, that essentially didn't exist in the United States. There was recently a ruling by a Navy board when a person in the Navy said, look, what you're giving us, the Pfizer jab and the Moderna jab, are not Comirnaty and are not Spikevax, and in fact are not, what you're giving us are the experimental use authorizations, which you cannot coerce, you cannot mandate. And in fact, this Navy board and the attorneys representing the Navy in that hearing said, you're right. Now, Pete, when myself and a number of us, like you said, came out and said, wait a minute, there's an approval process problem here. You're approving things that you don't, there's no vial of Comirnaty, there's no vial of Spikevax. We were called conspiracy theorists and that this was wrong. In fact, Pete, that board just in the past couple weeks confirmed exactly what a number of us were saying. And the public is unaware of that. Am I off on that assessment of approval?
No, it's correct. I'm glad you reported the recent court case, Dave. I have tremendous regulatory experience. I've presented at the FDA, multiple panels, consulted for Big Pharma, and for the and for the NIH, and so I know what I'm talking about. Both Moderna and Pfizer have what's called biological licensing agreements, BLAs. That's actually what was approved, and the BLA says you can move forward with approval. So Pfizer, this actually went to the German company Comirnaty, and it says you can move forward with approval, but you must commit to doing studies on myocarditis. You must have precautionary language about pregnant women showing we don't have evidence of safety or efficacy. And you must have a full package insert with the important safety information, and the FDA must agree upon that with the sponsor. So none of these products have actually made it through the biological licensing agreement process, and you have to get through the BLA to be fully approved. So it was a premature talking point to say that they were approved. And this went all the way up to the President of the United States. This triggered our Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, to proclaim that they're approved. But Americans and our military, Dave, they knew they weren't approved because the consent form still said emergency use authorization.
That's right.
That insurance companies didn't buy and sell these products. That as soon as they become approved, they're actually commercial products which people buy. No one's buying these vaccines. They're actually provided by the government under this emergency provision. And importantly, there's no package insert or important safety information. So Americans will know when they're approved, when their insurance company has to approve it or they have to purchase them, and when they see a full package label presented to them.
And as of June 2022, what you just discussed does not exist.
Does not exist. The vaccines are not fully FDA approved. There are biological licensing agreements that have not yet been fulfilled. So no, they are still emergency use authorized. Every consent in America, Dave, says either investigational or research on it.
That's right.
So everybody who gets a vaccine needs to understand they're in research. They're agreeing to do this. And that's protected by the Office of Human Research Protections, meaning there must be full and fair informed consent. That's the Declaration of Helsinki. And they must protect the Nuremberg Code, which says that no one may receive any pressure, coercion, or threat of reprisal. It means no doctor can put pressure on a patient, no employer, no family member. All of those are violations of medical ethics.
At that hearing in Washington, there was a presentation by Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long, a flight surgeon, who had grounded an entire air wing because of her concerns related to the jab and myocarditis. You and a number of others sent a letter to the FDA about this issue in not just military pilots, but commercial pilots. Pete, have you ever received a response from that letter talking about the jab and the fact that myocarditis, and we've had a captain from, I believe, American Airlines who arrested in the jetway about 7 minutes after he landed his plane in Dallas, Captain Bob Stone, I believe it is. Did you ever hear back from the FAA on that? And what is the risk related to pilots? Because when we were growing up, they were talking about the friendly skies. Well, it's actually morphed based on what's been going on into the potential deadly skies.
Well, let me say pilots have a special commitment to public safety in their physical health.
Right.
And as a cardiologist, many times I'm asked to examine a cardiologist, make sure the heart rhythm, the EKG, the heart pumping function, everything's okay. We can't put people who have health risks in a line where they could influence the risks of passengers in the sky. It could be catastrophic. This letter to the authorities did not get a response. However, United Airlines dropped their mandates. American Airlines, the largest carrier, dropped their mandates. Southwest Airlines paused their mandates. I think it had an impact. Mm-hmm. Now, Pilot Snow, who is in the age group where he could have atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, did suffer a cardiac arrest shortly after landing. He attributes this to the COVID-19 vaccines. Mm-hmm. I have not had a chance to individually review his records, but I do take his concerns at face value. That like any other pilot, he already had a class, 1 certification. He was already deemed good to go. The only thing that changed in his health was taking a COVID-19 vaccine. So he's got a legitimate claim. I think all Americans should pay attention.
Well, and there's some information in the available for folks. It says that when it comes to pilots, potentially 30, tell me if I'm wrong with this, but potentially 30% of those of pilots in our country around the world, because of the jab, are potentially a setup for myocarditis or have a history. Is that correct, or is that?
Well, it has to do with proportions. So the first proportion is who took the vaccine,
right?
And that's going to be a large number depending on which airline. The second one, is it the proportion of pilots who are men versus women? A large fraction are men, Dave. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And we know with myocarditis, 90% of cases are in men. Now, recent data, including a paper I have in the preprint server with Jessica Rose, show that the risk of myocarditis, while it peaks ages 18 to 24, it extends all the way up into the 70s. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of pilots in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. 2 papers by Jenna Schauer and colleagues using MRI and careful clinical data have shown a lot of people with myocarditis don't have symptoms, Dave. Mm-hmm. They may have just a little fever, a little body ache, but no chest pain, effort intolerance, or symptomatic heart failure yet. So the great concern here is that there's subclinical myocarditis and that nobody knows that fraction, but based on these proportions, it could be 30% of the pilot workforce.
And not just the pilot workforce, correct, Pete? Across the board, which could be why when the insurance companies are doing their, and you mentioned this earlier, their actuarial analysis, there are insurance companies, I believe the one from Indianapolis that came forward and said, we're seeing a 40% increase in all-cause mortality, and we're seeing a huge increase in disability claims. And it just so happens it coincided with the mandates and the coercion to get the jab starting in 2021. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, and I think the disability data is important because if there was another driver of the deaths, for instance, that didn't have a disability tail with it, like suicide, for instance, we wouldn't see disabilities going up. Those proportions are right in step with the disabilities and deaths we're seeing in the vaccine databases, including VAERS.
Pete, I want to touch on some things in the news to make people think, hey, wait a minute. Justin Bieber recently presented a video of himself speaking about him having Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. This is a neurologic condition, if you will, a facial paralysis similar to a Bell's palsy that somehow is also linked to having had the varicella zoster virus, the chickenpox virus in the past. Pete, when you look at the VAERS data out of the CDC, Bell's palsy, this facial nerve paralysis, has been documented in over 16,000 individuals related to the COVID jab. So when folks see that video, now remember, Justin Bieber's wife, who's also jabbed, by the way, I believe Justin Bieber had a limitation on those that came to his concerts, that they had to be jabbed. Interesting. His wife had what's called a patent foramen ovale in her heart, but she also developed blood clots, one of which is the complications related to the jab. She had a stroke in the recent past, and now we have Bieber with this Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. Pete, is there something that makes you think, hey, wait a minute, this might, yeah, okay, it could be related to a previous chickenpox infection, but you know what? It also might be related to the jab. That should be in the differential diagnosis. Am I off on that?
No, it should, Dave, and I'll point out that there are papers on this. One is by Dr. Rodriguez Martin, and this is in the peer-reviewed literature. The title of the paper is Ramsay-Hunt Syndrome Following Messenger RNA SARS-CoV-2 Vaccination. And there's a similar paper in the British Medical Journal as well, Dave. So we know the COVID-19 vaccines are associated with this. The interesting thing is that Bieber is of the age where he should have gotten the chickenpox vaccine. He should have gotten chickenpox vaccine. So he should actually have protection against varicella zoster. You know, one of the reasons to take chickenpox vaccine is so you don't get chickenpox. It should give you some protection against the varicella zoster reactivation syndromes, including Ramsay-Hunt. I'm in my 4th decade of internal medicine practice, continuously board certified, Dave. I got to tell you, I think I've seen 1 or 2 cases of Ramsay-Hunt. 1 or 2 cases. Now, sadly, the cases I saw were permanent, and they are different than Bell's palsy. But when you take a young guy like Bieber, who should already have some protection from the chickenpox vaccine, he's young. He's, younger than the age range we see for Ramsay-Hunt unvaccinated. And having him likely have taken the COVID-19 vaccine, since in fact he mandated it at his own concerts, you put all this together, it's very likely that he's going to line up now with the increasing number of public figures who have had vaccine injuries. And vaccine injuries or deaths, Dave, these, they started out with Hank Aaron.
Yes.
Hank Aaron, at a press conference about how good he was and how good he felt taking the vaccine, and a few days later he died. The two press briefings decoupled the vaccine exposure. We've had Marvin Hagler, Larry King, in the throes of acute COVID-19 was vaccinated. Midget Lewis, CNN correspondent. Bruce Willis has an aphasic stroke and can't talk anymore. We have Hailey Bieber with this thrombotic stroke, and now Justin Bieber. It's hard to imagine lightning would strike twice. Football great Deion Sanders has femoral artery thromboses and these lower extremity amputations. Now, he clearly was vaccinated because he was publicly claiming it and also chiding Aaron Rodgers for not taking the vaccine. Aaron decided not to take the vaccine and take the McCullough Protocol, get through the illness. Now we have my favorite college football broadcaster, Herb Kirkstreet, publicly announces he has COVID-19 in December of 2020. He takes his first round of shots in the spring of 2021. Remember, it's too late to take the vaccine if you've already had COVID, but he makes that mistake. He takes it, almost certainly took a booster in the fall. Now he's got a blood clot in the spring, can't go to the NFL draft, Dave. And these numbers keep going and going. We have public figures with obvious breakthrough infections. We have Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, second infection, third vaccine. He's still using this as some type of argument to take more shots. Anderson Cooper interviews Bill Gates. Anderson takes 3 shots. Gates takes 4. They both get COVID. Anderson asks Gates for medical advice on CNN, and Gates, his advice is take more shots. Dave, when you see absurdity that is taking vaccines every 6 months for an illness and continuing to get the illness over and over again, that's absurdity. That's diagnostic of the false narrative.
And we just saw this from Trudeau. As you said, he's had COVID now a second time. He's been double jabbed, boosted, and he makes the statement. And I want to address this, Pete, because we see this all. Thank God I got the jab. And thank God I got boosted, because you know what? I'm not as sick as I would have been if I would not have done this. Now that's like saying, Pete, I decided to join Weight Watchers, and after a month I gained 100 pounds. Thank God I joined Weight Watchers, because if I hadn't, I would have gained 200 pounds. I mean, Pete, this makes no analytical or intuitive sense.
And Dave, it's not supported by the evidence.
No.
Remember, the vaccines are only clinically indicated for someone who's never had COVID to try to prevent COVID, and they've failed at this. There never was a clinical indication. There's no FDA indication to have the vaccine after you've had COVID over and over again. It's not in any of the EUA documents to do this. It's clearly off any type of label to keep taking vaccines once you've had COVID-19. And we have a multitude of papers showing excess harm and risk when one does this. It's pretty clear they don't work. Our CDC now claims December 10th, 2021, that 79% of Omicron, Americans with Omicron, were fully vaccinated. Mm-hmm. You know, when we have the majority of people who are fully vaccinated getting the problem, that is an indicator that the vaccines have failed.
Let's conclude with this, Pete. Many people watching this interview said, look, I got coerced into taking this. Or I took this early on and I didn't realize the ramifications. Is there anything people can do to minimize the potential adverse effects, short, medium, and long term, that occurred from taking the jab?
Dave, unfortunately, buyer's remorse is the base of the most frequent question I get is, listen, I regret it. I had to do it for non-medical reasons. How do I get this stuff out of my body? And I have to tell you, the autopsy studies done on people taking the vaccines are awful, Dave. It's in the brain, it's in the heart, the skin, stuck in the lymph nodes. The vaccine and the spike protein produced from it's everywhere in the body. These lipid nanoparticles are designed to go everywhere. It doesn't look good. There's no way to get it out of the body. And I think the very unfortunate thing is people aren't taking the vaccines for health reasons at this juncture. They're taking them for non-medical reasons. Anytime you take a pill or take a shot for a non-medical reason, it's going to lead to misadventure and probably harm.
Mm-hmm. So to those that say, well, there's a protocol, you have the McCullough Protocol for treatment. Do you know of any protocol that could be implemented to try to minimize?
Yeah, there are two protocols. Remember, there is no acknowledgement of vaccine injuries by the CDC, NIH, or FDA as something to treat. Okay,
right. So
we have the World Council for Health has some suggestions or protocols for post-vaccine remorse, if you will, or regret. And now recently the Frontline Critical Care Alliance, FLCC.net, do. Now, again, they're just suggestions, no randomized trials. But the concern here, Dave, is this comes up every 6 months. 6 months is a short period of time. People have to face this every 6 months now. A recent article, New York Times 2 weeks ago, front page, said 35% of Americans have either not taken the vaccine or they're not going to take a booster. So I have to tell you, that's more than a third of the country has said they've had enough. And the people who said now they're not going to have a booster because they either have lost their trust or they've been injured, you really can't convince them. Whenever I see an employee who's been injured from one of the vaccines, they always tell me, listen, I'm not going to take another booster. And then I ask them, well, why didn't you have that conviction to begin with, with the first shot? And many people have said, they said, listen, I thought I could get away with it.
Right. Russian roulette, Pete, as you spoke of earlier. Loaded chamber. Pete, educate our listeners on how they can follow you on a daily basis to get more information and be up to date on the most recent developments, which is a service you provide.
Well, I'd like every listener, Dave, to go to couragetofacecovid.com, couragetofacecovid.com. Check out our new book, Courage to Face COVID-19. It's already a bestseller in at least 3 categories on Amazon. There's a link to a portal. Purchase it on Amazon. I'm going to get you your review copy, Dave, as a journalist. And it's a fast read. It's the only COVID-19 book read by a best-selling author who can write it in a story. It's the only one that's presented in a story. We've presented a lot of data today, Dave, but the human mind understands complex realities in a story, and it's a fast read. You can read it on a 2-hour plane flight. It's got fun chapters, explains, I'm a character in the book, many others. How did I start working on treatment? And Dr. Rialt in France and Zelenko, how did we congeal on similar concepts? Why did the White House call me in the spring of 2020 when the calamity was occurring? Why was myself and others on the floor of the U.S. Senate? So I play a big role in it, but I want the readers to understand the story. Mm-hmm. Dave, when my dad got COVID, Dave, was I going to follow the NIH guidelines and just sit back and let the virus slaughter my dad? No. I think any American can understand that doctors have a duty to treat. So go to couragetofacecovid.com and get a copy of the book and have a fun read, because it's all evidence-based, it's all facts, it's heavily cited. Every single event is cited in there, and it's all contemporary. We don't go back in time. It's all contemporary. Now, you can follow me on my Twitter feed, P_McCullough MD. I'm very careful on Twitter, but I have thousands of papers posted, key videos, and updates. I'm a frequent contributor on Fox News, almost all the major news networks, so I show clips there. I have a link tree, petermcculloughmd.com, which links up all the social media. And then the last thing I'll mention is I'll invite everybody to listen in on my podcast. Mm-hmm. It goes twice on Saturday and Sunday, the McCullough Report. It's on America Out Loud Talk Radio, McCullough Report. We also have a 5 p.m. health edition called Pulse on America Out Loud. Now, I do the Wednesday session with Malcolm Out Loud, but the other sessions are led by leading physicians, and they go over contemporary issues, Dave, not just all medicines, medical ethics, what's happening in the field of medical practice, helpful tips, commentary. Now is the age, Dave, of independent media. Yeah. People are basically, there are so many young people that don't even have cable TV. They are basically getting their information through trusted independent media.
Pete, I'd like to thank you for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. My dad's favorite statement was, dream big and dare to fail. Not dream big and dare to win, because, as he said, if you just dare to win, you don't leave it all on the field. And something you do 24/7, Pete, is you leave it all on the field. And I'd like to thank you for your perseverance, dedication, and sacrifice to humanity, because of that dedication and sacrifice and perseverance, millions of people are alive today and healthy today who might have gone to the other side because they followed the recommendations of big government, big medicine, big pharma, big insurance, and the medical industrial complex. And I thank you, Pete, for your service to humanity.
Thank you, Dave.
And I thank you, folks, for joining us. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.